The first thing we're going to talk about today in compound inequalities is how to graph them. So when we are graphing compound inequalities, there are two types that we're going to talk about. One is an OR. Our type 1 is an OR. This appears like this, where you have two inequalities. See, I have two inequalities with OR in between them. So the thing that we need to know about OR inequalities is they have a tendency to graph apart. And what does that mean? Well, let's take a look. We have two inequalities that we have to graph. The first one is x is less than or equal to -2. So I need to look on the number line. I need to find -2. -2 is right here. I notice that I have an or equal to underneath the inequality. So that means that I need a filled in circle. Okay. The arrow is pointing to the left. I have x on the left, so I can trust the direction that the arrow is pointing. The arrow is pointing to the left. So from -2, I need to draw my arrow going to the left. So the other inequality that we have is x is greater than 3. So we know we need to start at 3, and we know we need an open circle over 3 because we don't have or equal to underneath our inequality symbol. So I've drawn a circle over 3. 3 is not there, but I know that 3 is between 2 and 4. So I put an open circle over 3. The arrow is pointing to the right, so I'm going to draw my arrow going to the right. So what you've done here is you've graphed the OR compound inequality. Notice that our graph is apart from each other. There's this gap right here in the middle. So anytime we have an OR, they tend to graph apart, meaning that you'll have a gap in the middle of your graph. So from here, we want to talk about interval notation for this. So again, just like we did in the previous lesson, we're going to go from left to right. I start over here on the left. The first thing I have on the left is this arrow that's pointing toward -infinity. So I'm going to write parenthesis, -infinity. I always use parenthesis on infinity. And then I keep going. And my first stopping place is right here at x equals -2. So I need a -2. Notice that it's or equal to. I've drawn a closed in circle because of that. So I also need a square bracket. So now we need to know how to write the gap in our interval notation. So the way that we make up this gap in interval notation is we use this symbol. It looks like an uppercase U. This U stands for union. So I need a U to make the gap in my graph stand out in the interval notation. And then I keep going left to right. The next thing I come to after the gap is 3. It is only greater than, so I used an open circle. That means I need a parenthesis here. Parenthesis on 3, comma, and then after that I go to +infinity. So I need a +infinity here and a parenthesis on my infinity. So that is how we graph an OR inequality, an OR compound inequality, and that's how we do interval notation for OR. So now that we've done that, let's jot here over on the side or at the top when we need parentheses, when we need brackets, when we need open circles, and when we need closed circles. So remember, if I'm only looking at less than or greater than, less than or greater than, I need to use parentheses in interval notation. And open circle in the graph. When I have less than or equal to, greater than or equal to, this means I need to use square brackets in interval notation. And closed circles in the graph. Okay, so now that we've graphed an OR compound inequality, let's go to the next page of notes and graph an AND compound inequality. AND inequalities tend to graph together. So what do we have here? We have two inequalities that we need to graph. We have the word AND in the middle. So let's graph one piece at a time. I've got x is greater than or equal to -6. So because I have or equal to underneath the inequality symbol, I need a closed circle over -6. The variable's on the left, so I can trust the direction that the inequality is pointing. The inequality is pointing to the right. Next, we'll work on x is less than or equal to 1. For x less than or equal to 1, I need a closed circle over the number 1. And because the variable's on the left, I can trust the direction that the arrow is pointing. I need to draw an arrow that goes to the left. So remember before, on the OR inequality, we had an arrow going out and an arrow going out. And they had, remember we said OR graphed apart. Okay, this time we had an and you see that our arrows are going together. So that's why and inequalities have a tendency to graph together. So now we're ready for interval notation. Going from left to right, the first thing that we come to is -6. -6 with a bracket because we have or equal to underneath our inequality symbol, comma. The last thing we come to is 1. Again with a bracket because we have or equal to underneath the inequality symbol. So our interval notation for this, square bracket -6, comma 1, another square bracket. We don't use infinity because we did not draw an arrow over the arrows that go to either positive infinity or negative infinity. So that's interval notation and how to graph the AND inequality. So you're ready for the assignment that goes with this. You're ready to graph compound inequalities, both OR and AND inequalities.